The Nashville Predators may be out of the playoffs, but tonight the Milwaukee Admirals kick off their postseason against the Manitoba Moose. On today's show, we talked to good friend and Preds prospect guru Eric Dene about the Admirals playoff matchup, which players will be keys to the Ad's success, and we talk about Karl Taylor and his future. All that's coming up on today's Locked On Predators podcast.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Predators your first listen of the day. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer and editor at InsideThePreds.com. And today I am joined by Eric Dene, writer at PenaltyBoxRadio.com and Predators prospect expert, to talk about the baby Preds. We're going to discuss the players who saw ice time in Nashville this season, preview the matchup tonight against the Manitoba Moose, and I'm going to put Eric on the hot seat with some rapid fire prospect questions. So I am joined now by our great friend Eric Dene. He is a Nashville Predators prospect guru who writes for Penalty Box Radio. Eric, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us yet again about the baby Preds.
Yeah, excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, a lot going on for you to keep track of this season. So first, let's start and kind of take a look back at this season. So many Admirals players ended up seeing time in Nashville for one reason or another. Whose performance in Nashville surprised you the most?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it was Luke Evangelista, and not really because, I didn't think the skill was there. That has always been kind of a clear hallmark of his game. But for me, just watching him in Milwaukee, he was getting pushed off pucks too much. He wasn't really winning battles in the corner. And as good as his transition numbers in the AHL were, I was just a little concerned that he didn't quite have the foot speed yet to excel as much in transition in the NHL. And, he really fit right in. It looks like he didn't really skip that much of a beat, and turned out to be one of the Preds' most productive players down the stretch. So, I still think there's maybe a bit of a question about whether he starts the season in Nashville or not next year. I wouldn't say that it would hurt him to go back to Milwaukee, kind of like Tommy Novak did. But I know some folks are probably going to be upset if he doesn't start the season in Nashville next year. So,
yeah, I think you are probably right. What part of his game do you want to see him develop before next season?
Yeah, I mean, I think just going back to the strength thing, I think that's a bit of a domino effect, right? So when you're a bit stronger on the puck, you can maintain possession longer in the offensive zone, and you're not as necessarily reliant on a bit of a give and go, quick passing game. You can be a bit more of a dominant possession team. That's something that a player like Tommy Novak, I think, has improved a lot over the past couple of years. And I think that's something that a player like Juuso Parssinen demonstrated a lot this year when he wasn't injured. And for Evangelista, I still think he has to rely a little bit on just getting rid of the puck as quickly as possible and then finding that open ice. And that's fine. But, I'm pretty confident that he can kind of take that to the next step. And then at the end of the ice too, it just helps with breakouts. It helps with winning puck battles along the boards. And it helps when teams are closing down on you in transition. So I think just adding weight, adding muscle, that will really help kind of unlock bigger potential in the rest of his game.
Yeah, I'm all about beefing up Luke Evangelista. I'm willing to send him cookies, whatever it takes, because just a little bit more of him to love would be great. You mentioned Tommy Novak. So let's talk about Thomas Novak and the season that he had with Nashville. Were you surprised by how he performed in the NHL down the stretch?
I think I was surprised a bit just in terms of the numbers. I have always been a really big Tommy Novak fan. Going back to his draft year, it was very obvious how skilled of a player he was. I remember people were making the argument that he could have been a first round pick. And, I might not have gone that far, but he had a lot of injury issues in college that really derailed his development. that forced him into taking an AHL deal right out of college instead of an NHL deal. And he's really worked his way up. It felt to me like he didn't really have much left to prove in the AHL, but again, similar to kind of a criticism I had of Alex Carrier when he was coming through the system, is I just wasn't really sure that the foot speed was going to translate to the NHL. And maybe that's something that I need to look back on and realize, you have to kind of play to your opponent a bit. You play to your skill level a bit in between these leagues. But he really took a step this year. I'm not expecting him to be a point per game player next season, but I was really impressed with how consistently down the stretch he was scoring. It wasn't just a fluke, and he's always had great vision. He's always been a really excellent passer, but he really found an ability to get to open ice to make those plays that I wasn't quite sure he would consistently be able to in the NHL.
He was definitely one of Nashville's most exciting players down the stretch. Another player that I wish we could have seen more of, but was out due to injury, you mentioned Juuso Parssinen. What did you think of his game? What do you think is kind of his trajectory going forward?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much everyone who follows my work knows how big of a fan I've been of his for the past 4 years, ever since he was drafted. I had him as a 5th round pick in my 2019 draft work, and he was a 7th round pick. And pretty quickly after that draft, I identified him as someone that I think the Preds might have gotten a bit of a steal in. Mm-hmm. In talking with folks over in Finland, where he's been playing the past few years, I've come to understand that he is. He maybe has a bit of a Nathan McKinnon attitude, maybe not so far that much, but
yes.
A really aggressive attitude when it comes to working out and bettering himself and making sure he's in kind of peak condition. And I think that really showed this year. He is not the best skater. He is not the fastest player on the ice. But he, as cliche as it sounds, will be one of the hardest workers out there every shift. Yeah. And that attitude of his, it really is clear when he's on the ice. So I saw a lot of improvements in his game. I saw a lot more intelligent decisions with the puck. I saw him skating more with his head up instead of down. I saw him, being smarter about taking angles to opposing puck carriers. Just a lot more intelligent in his game than he initially demonstrated over in Finland. And I think that's really just helped put a lot of the pieces together for him. So I don't necessarily think he's a number one center in the NHL, but I do think he can be a very good middle six center, if not winger. And there's still going to be some growing pains, I imagine, but it's clear to me that what I've kind of been banging the table on for the past few years is coming true, and that the Nashville's really found quite a gem here in the 7th round.
I agree with you. I have loved seeing him, hated that he was injured. I want to ask you about a player we didn't see very much in Nashville, but who is near and dear to my heart. So just go ahead and be effusive in your praise of this guy. But talk about Spencer Stastny for a minute. I know we only saw him for 8 games, but what did you think of his performance just in that little glimpse we had of him in the NHL?
Yeah, another prospect I've been a huge fan of. I've kind of said it for a few years now since he was at Notre Dame, that he was mechanically the best skater in the pipeline. And I remember at the beginning of the season, I posed that question to Karl Taylor. I said, who do you think is the best skater on this team right now? And his answer was Spencer Stastny, and he went so far as to say he might be the best skater he's ever coached. So, with a foundation like that, it's really, that just brings so many benefits to your game. And I think that really underlined his ability to jump into NHL action this year. He wasn't putting up elite offensive numbers in the AHL, but him and Adam Wilsby were the Admirals' best pure defensive pair in terms of limiting zone entries, and reversing the ice, exiting the zone on their own as quickly as possible. And that's because they're both very good skaters, and particularly Stastny. So I'm excited for him to get a longer look this summer and in training camp next year. Again, another player that I don't think it would be bad for him to start the season in Milwaukee again, but really encouraging to see so many positives from him in such kind of a trial by fire situation.
Yeah, he was one of my highlights. Like I said, only saw him 8 games, but I was so excited when he got called up. Is there a player from Milwaukee that didn't see time in Nashville that you were surprised didn't get a chance this season?
I don't know about didn't get a chance. I mean, it feels like they kind of called everybody up.
Yeah.
But to kind of give two answers, I guess, one, I think John Leonard probably deserved a longer look.
Yeah.
Certainly a product of him being in Milwaukee most of the year, but I could very easily make the argument that he was Milwaukee's best skater this season, through a lot of metrics. And maybe he's just that. Maybe he is just a 4A player, kind of like a Taylor Beck type who can max out at the AHL level but can't quite cut it at the NHL level. But I think he kind of deserved more opportunity. And then I guess one player that didn't get called up that I was a bit surprised about is Mark Del Gaizo.
Yes.
I don't think Del Gaizo is like an NHL ready defenseman by any means, and I'm not even certain that he has like the future as a top 6 defender in the NHL. But especially if we're giving Spencer Stastny a chance, and no offense towards him, I at least thought Del Gaizo would get a couple games here or there. I think he's really found a kind of a good role in the AHL. And he doesn't really excel at a ton of things, but he's very good at a lot of things. And I am really curious to see how those things kind of project at the NHL level. So I would have been curious to see some games from him.
For sure. Want to talk to you about Reid Schaefer. This is somebody the Predators acquired in the Matthias Ekholm trade. What do you see from him? What do you like about him? What do Predators fans need to know about him?
Yeah, he's a really interesting prospect. He was someone who there was a lot of smoke around him moving up draft boards towards nearing the draft last season. I had him, I think, as like a 3rd round pick, but I knew going into draft night that he was going to be taken in the 1st round. I think it was that obvious how much general managers liked him. I think both David Poile and Scott Nickel mentioned that he was high on their draft board as well at the draft last year. He is an interesting prospect. I like the bite he plays with. I like his shooting talent is very good. I think he's got a bit of untapped potential in the playmaking department. And I think he can be a really strong kind of like immediate, area around the net player. He's really versatile in that sense and has been used a lot in the penalty kill this year as well. I think the two flags are one, he is one of the most frustrating transition players I've ever watched. Some nights, not even nights, like one shift, he really looks quite flawless in transition and quite unstoppable. And then the next, he just is tripping over the blue line and losing really easy pucks. And it just doesn't really add up. And the second thing is it's been really hard to scout his development this year because Seattle, the team he plays for in the WHL, is genuinely nearly unbeatable. They are scoring 7, 8, 9 goals a night. And when you're on a team that good, that stacked, it's really hard to kind of get a true picture of what a player's flaws are, what a player's, what they've bettered. It's just a difficult kind of thing to grasp like you would on a normal NHL or AHL team that are a bit more balanced. So it's been a bit hard to get a pun intended, a good read on his game this year.
I'm so proud of you for that one. Okay, so let's set aside our Milwaukee guys for one more second. Talk to me about the prospects who are still in the playoff race. Who is still competing? Who do you think has a good chance of staying in the postseason for a longer stretch for the Preds prospects?
Yeah, well, at this rate, it seems almost a guarantee that the Preds will have at least one prospect playing in the Memorial Cup. So in the QMJHL, Zach L'Heureux and the Halifax Mooseheads are going to be taking on the Sherbrooke Phoenix in the semifinals of the QMJHL playoffs. They don't have conferences there, but it's effectively the conference final. In the OHL, the Ottawa 67s were just eliminated, but the Sarnia Sting and Nolan Burke are still playing. They are in the conference finals, I think, for the first time ever for that franchise. Oh, wow. And then in the Western Conference, you've got the Seattle Thunderbirds, previously mentioned, and the Winnipeg Ice, who Graham Sword plays for, both playing in their conference finals. So If those two teams win their current series, they'll face each other in the WHL championship. Sarnia, obviously, in the conference finals in the OHL, and then Halifax has 2 more rounds to go in the QMJHL. So, I mean, look, I'll say this seems like it's Seattle's title to lose.
Right.
I would be pretty shocked if they don't win the WHL and go to the Memorial Cup. Halifax is going to have a tough series against Sherbrooke. A lot of folks are picking the Phoenix to win that one, but Halifax has been really dominant this season as well. And Sarnia will be taking on London, I believe. That'll be a really good back and forth series. I think either team could come out on top there. But the Sting are pretty loaded up for a Memorial Cup run too. So I would at the very least expect to see Schaefer and Luke Prokop in the Memorial Cup, and maybe L'Heureux or Nolan Burke as well.
So a lot going on just outside of Milwaukee, but we are going to get to Milwaukee here in a minute. A lot happening for the Admirals, kind of an exciting start to the postseason for them. So we're going to dive into that with Eric in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by our great friends at eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit, or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop at eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Now, the Admirals are jumping into the postseason after some extended time off compared to some of these other teams. Do you see that affecting the team going into their series against Manitoba?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting on one hand, like the guys who have been there for the end of the regular season, they were probably itching to get started. But on the other hand, for the guys coming back from Nashville, they might appreciate having a bit of a break. The AHL last year expanded their playoff field, so it's pretty hard to not make the playoffs there now. But what that means is because the Admirals finished second in their division, they effectively get a first round bye, which means they didn't play for a week and a half or so. But the schedule's all messed up. But yeah, that's how it works. So I think that's the big question, right? Is, Manitoba, who they're taking on, has had a similar break. So I'm not sure it'll be much of an excuse, but I'll be curious to see, once the puck drops, to see how that affects their game.
Yeah. So we have some of these young men who had time here in Nashville coming back to the Milwaukee Admirals. How do you see them transitioning back into the team, especially when really the Admirals kind of had a good thing going down the stretch while a lot of these players were in Nashville? How is that going to play out?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote about this in my playoff preview for Milwaukee on Penalty Box Radio that came out earlier this week. And I think that's kind of my X factor question right here. If you look at the Admirals kind of projected top 6 in this series, you've got Kiefer Sherwood, Mark Jankowski, Cole Schneider, John Leonard. Sorry, Ryan Leonard is his brother, who will be drafted this summer. Luke Evangelista and Phil Tomasino. And all but 2 of those guys pretty much spent most of the year in Nashville. On one hand, yeah, it's kind of interesting, will this disrupt the chemistry? On the other hand, it really does push the rest of the roster down a bit to be kind of properly fulfilling their roles. Anthony Angelo, for instance, I think was really excellent since coming over in a trade at the trade deadline in a top 6 role. But, kind of keeping that chemistry together with his frequent line mates in a 3rd line or 4th line role, I think, could hopefully provide just as similar results, but with a bit less pressure, right? The team's not relying on them to kind of deliver everything. The real kind of conundrum here is that now going into the playoffs, Karl Taylor has 18 forwards on this roster, and that does not include Marcus Nurmi and Jakob Kondolik, who are both hurt and done for the year. So what that means is, simple math, 6 guys are going to be sitting every night, right? And these aren't just, Tommy Apap or Navrin Mutter, guys who haven't really seen much of the lineup except when needed this year. I mean, there's a very real chance that Joachim Kemmel's not going to be playing every game. There's a real chance that Isaac Ratcliffe, who's been great since coming over at the trade deadline, will be playing every game. Even someone like Michael McCarron, there's going to be a lot of competition in that bottom 6 to kind of get ice time. And it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. The one benefit there is if injuries happen or if, Karl Taylor needs to mix things up, he's got 6 extra guys to do that with.
Right.
But that's a lot of guys to be sitting in the press box. So it'll be interesting to see how that lineup takes shape.
Yeah, this is going to be really interesting to see who he starts in the game that's going to be tonight when we air this, tomorrow night as we're talking right now. So let's talk about Manitoba. What do we need to know about this team?
Yeah, Manitoba's an interesting squad. So Milwaukee played them last year in the playoffs. Milwaukee won. It was their first playoff series victory in, I think, over 10 years. If anyone watched that series, I don't think you would disagree with me that the Moose deserved to win. The Devin Cooley played some of his best hockey and pretty much got shelled every night. But at this point, this year, these teams are, I think, a lot different. Despite all the roster turnover, Milwaukee was legitimately one of the best teams in the AHL this year, not without their warts. The Moose, however, are a bit on paper, a bit weaker. Offensively, they've kind of got 3 guys that really drive the engine here, and that's Dominic Toninato, Jansen Harkins, and Alex Limoges. Those guys account for a lot of their offense, and they're 3 very good players, very good scorers. They, I think, chipped in for almost 140 points this year combined. But beyond that, it's a bit of I don't want to say a hodgepodge, but an interesting mixture of guys who are very good AHL players, but maybe don't have the kind of pedigree on paper that Milwaukee's roster does. That being said, in their 8 matchups this year, Manitoba outshot Milwaukee. And that was a big problem for the Admirals this year is getting outshot a lot, frankly. The Moose are missing some key guys like Christian Reichel. He's out for the year with an injury, but they also just got Danny Zhilkin from the OHL, who was a 3rd-round pick of the Jets a few years ago. So that'll be kind of interesting, but there's really the 3 guys up top that you got to watch for. And then the defense. Really, this is like the big, I think, kind of going to be the big impact for the Moose here if they're going to succeed. So much like they have 3 forwards, they kind of have 3 defenders who really kind of set the bar high. There's Declan Chisholm, who I think is a really solid AHL defender. There is Leon Gawanka, who, if you've watched a lot of Admirals games, you've heard his name a lot because he seemingly scores every time they play. And there's Ville Heinola, who has a really high pedigree as a top draft pick of the Jets. Gawanka scored 20 goals this year, which is really crazy for a defenseman in the AHL. He has been a pain in the side of this team for a really long time. And those 3 specifically, but their defense core as a whole, they're really aggressive in the offensive zone. They float low, they get in higher danger scoring positions, and they put pressure on the Admirals wingers when the Admirals are trying to clear the zone. So it's going to be really incumbent on them to win those battles, to make sure they're clearing the puck and setting Milwaukee up for a good transition game, because Manitoba is going to do their best to try and reverse the ice as quickly as possible. That's how they're going to catch Milwaukee off guard. And you can count on those guys like Gawanka and Heinola and Chisholm to be heavily involved in the offense. And then finally, at the goalie position, this is really where the big question mark is. By the time folks listen to this, we'll know whether the Winnipeg Jets are still in the NHL playoffs or not. But right now, both of the Moose's goalies are recalled to Winnipeg, which means if they stay in the playoffs, they will be starting a goalie who played 2 AHL games this year in game 1. Not ideal, but certainly can't count Evan Cormier out. I take that with a grain of salt. That being said, even if Arvid Holm and Askari Salminen come back to Manitoba, Milwaukee's certainly got the edge in goaltending.
Yes.
with Yaroslav Askarov. So I think those are kind of the keys to success here. A good series from Askarov, kind of the continuous bend, don't break defense from Milwaukee, and just making sure Milwaukee's forwards are kind of beating the Moose's aggressive defense in transition. And I think Milwaukee will be set up for success here.
Who is the one player from each team that you think that viewers need to keep an eye on in this particular series?
Yeah. I think for Manitoba, it's who I already mentioned. It's Leon Gawanka.
Yeah.
Like I said, if the Moose succeed in the series, he will be a really big reason why. And he can be lethal from the point. So, folks need to watch out for him. For Milwaukee, I think, the first answer that kind of comes to my mind is Askarov. But truthfully, the player I'm most interested in is Kiefer Sherwood.
Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, Milwaukee's got a few guys who are, ostensibly like mostly NHL caliber players coming back into the lineup, and they really have and need to take any opportunity they can to just put a stranglehold on this series and not even let Manitoba get into things. So I think a big part of that is going to be Kiefer Sherwood, on his game and scoring at a high clip. And if he can do that, then I think I don't think this will be as challenging of a series as otherwise.
All right, Eric, coming up, I'm going to put you on the hot seat. I'm going to ask you some questions, and you're going to speak truth to us.
Okay.
Eric, I'm going to put you on the hot seat. I am going to ask you some questions, and I'm 100% sure you're going to get them right. But let's just throw it out here, and we'll find out sooner or later. So which player from Milwaukee do you see making Nashville's roster right out of training camp, and why?
That's a hard answer. That's a hard one to answer because so many guys are basically up there by now.
Right.
From this season. Man, that's tough. I mean, I think the kind of maybe not obvious case here, but like one I'm waffling on is Evangelista.
Yeah.
I think there's a case to be made that he starts the season in Milwaukee again and kind of gets a little more seasoning, but. After this performance in the NHL this year, it can be hard to kind of turn that aside, but he'll need to keep the momentum going during training camp. And I think if you can do that, then, he should be set for a full-time role in Nashville next year.
All right. Who is going to win the Manitoba-Milwaukee series and in how many games?
I will go with Milwaukee in 4 games. It's a best of 5 series, by the way, for everyone.
Just so we're clear.
Yeah.
Who is going to be the standout player for Milwaukee in this series?
I'll go Askarov. I think he can piece together a good stretch of games here. He had a few moments, multi-week stretches this year where he was really just lights out. And hopefully he'll be dialed in and on his game and be able to piece together another outstanding series.
All right. If they do win this, will he bench press the goal?
I think only if he gets a shutout. But
I'm telling you, could he be any more darling? Could that boy be any more darling? I love him.
I think Karl Taylor might argue that he would be if he stayed in the net just a little more. But other than that, that might be this team's undoing, honestly, is if he gets caught like pinned against the boards trying to retrieve a puck or something. Yeah. So
does he stress you out sometimes watching him?
I don't think as much as others. I think it's like fun. I don't know. Maybe I'm like jaded or something, but like, why not? Right. It's the AHL. Like the stakes are, I think, a little lower. So, but yeah, I mean, I can see that, when he gets to the NHL, that's maybe not so much in the cards as it is right now.
Yeah. So coming up in the draft in June, Nashville has picks out the wazoo. What are a few names that Predators fans should know that Nashville may look at?
Yeah. I mean, I could be here for days considering the number of draft picks they have.
Gosh, yeah.
Yeah. A few guys that I'll kind of give in the first round, if you will. This is, I think, in the first round at least, is kind of a forward heavy class. But one guy that really stands out is Axel Sandin Palika. who is a Swedish defender who plays in Skellefteå, which is the same club that Anton Olsen plays for. He is, I think he's a really, really strong player. Might end up being the best defender from this class. Someone who I think will be there, maybe in the early teens, but he's a guy I'm keeping an eye on. Another guy who has been, I think his name's starting to get out there, particularly with the U18s going on right now, is Ryan Leonard, who I kind of mentioned earlier. This is
Yes.
John Leonard's brother. He plays for the U.S. national team development program, which it's been a fun squad this year, but I like his game a lot. It's honestly not too dissimilar from his brothers. I think a bit more speed, a little bit more skill, a bit more shooting talent at that age, but I like his profile a lot. And then a personal favorite of mine, not showing any bias as a Slovak, but Dalibor Dvorsky is a really exciting player. He'll be a first-round pick. He is currently tearing it up at the U18s for Slovakia, playing in Sweden, though, in the Hockey Allsvenskan. And he's just really creative. He is a bit like, not to compare to kind of a previous Slovak, but a Philip Mejzar type insofar as his kind of playmaking and ability to be cunning and creative along the boards with the puck. But he can be a human highlight reel at times, and I'm excited to see what he does once he gets to an NHL club.
All right, hot seat question: will Tommy Novak replicate his success next season?
If by replicate his success you mean be a point per game player, no. But if by that you mean be a legitimate top 6 player, if he plays a full season, 50 plus points, I say that's very possible. Yeah.
All right, last question, really putting you on the hot seat with this one. Will Karl Taylor be the next coach of the Nashville Predators?
Ooh, that is tough. I don't know if I've put that much thought into kind of the John Hines debate.
Oh, save
in
yourself.
terms of, well, I know how I feel in terms of like when I think he will go.
Right.
How short or long of a leash he has heading into next season. Look, I think particularly if Milwaukee goes on a bit of a run here, then Taylor's going to be a hot commodity in the NHL this offseason. I'm not sure that this franchise wants to lose him. I don't know if Barry Trotz has given any assurances about, hey, if we fire John Hines midseason next year, like you're the guy. But we'll see. I would like to think so. I am not. I like Karl Taylor a lot. I am not someone who thinks that like managing an AHL club the way he has translates to automatic success at the NHL level. And in some cases, a whole different beast. But I am pretty certain that he will provide a much fresher kind of developmental approach than John Hines does. Someone who has always weirdly been described as like a very good developmental coach. And I think the only reason people say that is because he coached the U.S. national team development program once.
Right.
But that doesn't mean he was like good at it per se.
It means it was his job.
Right. Also, like things change once you get to the NHL. So we'll see. I would like to think so, but I think it just depends on timeline and, Taylor's prospects this summer.
Yeah, I think that's a question everybody's going to be watching for because I don't think the Predators or Preds fans want to lose Karl Taylor, period.
Yeah, I mean, they'd be smart not to, or they would be smart to not lose him. But we'll see, this franchise has not shown the best asset management skills in the past. Please don't watch the Seattle Kraken in the NHL playoffs. But
oh gosh, we don't even talk about that. We don't talk about that.
But I guess it's who knows at this point.
Yep, we'll see. Eric, love having you on. Love talking about prospects. The Admirals are going to be taking on the Manitoba Moose. You can see the games at AHL TV. They're going to start at 7:00 Central Time tonight. Is that right?
That's
7:00 Central. All right, Eric, where can everybody find your work?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at OnTheFuturePBR, and you can find all my written work at penaltyboxradio.com.
Again, want to thank Eric for joining me today to talk about the Milwaukee Admirals and the prospects in the pipeline. Again, the Admirals kick off their postseason run against the Manitoba Moose tonight at 7 p.m. Central Time. You can check out the games on AHL TV. Next week, Nick will be back and we will recap what is going on with the Admirals in their playoff series. Plus, we're going to start diving into those player report cards. All that's going to be coming up next week. Have a great weekend, everyone. We'll see you then.